And welcome back to 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network. Josh and Chris here with you on a Tuesday. Chris, it's that time of the week. NFL Power Rankings, our top 10 teams in the National Football League. Would you like the honors of kicking us off at number 10?
Oh, thank you very much. I would be happy to. I would be honored to. And I was just telling you off air here a minute ago. Most of the past few weeks, I've written down like 13 teams that I thought belonged in the top 10, and then tried to whittle that down to 10, of course. This week, I kind of wrote down like 7 or 8 teams, and then I was like, well, what's next? It's not that I don't have any, it's not that there aren't teams that deserve to be 9 or 10. It's that like a lot of the teams for me that were between like 9 and 13 on my list all kind of had discouraging losses this
Yep,
weekend for the most
yep.
part. So I'm kind of looking at it thinking like, well, which ones am I not upset about, and which ones am I actually thinking are a bad sign? My 10 this week is the Browns. They lost to the Jets, but they were missing their top 4 wide receivers due to COVID issues. Baker Mayfield just could not make it work with all the inexperienced replacements that they had, because that's a lot. 4 top receivers out, and the defense just on that team isn't good enough to overcome that. A win against Pittsburgh this weekend will put them in the playoffs. Pittsburgh not with a ton to play for. Obviously, they're trying to get more on track heading to the playoffs, but as far as their outlook for the playoffs, they don't have a ton to play for. So there's still hope for the Browns. I'm willing to write off a lot of their struggles. The Jets was bad. It was bad. Like, I understand it was really bad, but they were missing their top 4 wide receivers. So I'm willing to give them a pass to that degree. They're still 10th for me this week. How about you?
I'm surprised you have them and I don't. My 10 is the Dolphins. I,
Okay, I have them 11, so
yeah, and
I
I
would have the
probably
Dolphins 11. Yeah,
I went back and forth a little bit with the Browns. I was so high on that team. I really thought they were a different kind of Browns, and then they lost to the Jets, which is about the most Brown things ever. I understand they didn't have
sure.
receivers.
Mm-hmm.
I made this point with Josh yesterday. I mean, Carson Wentz won a division playing with that kind of lineup.
Mm-hmm.
You got to find a way to win the football game. And right, there are
Sure.
a lot of teams that, to some degree, got passes because of these bad losses and some extenuating circumstances. I had a team that I wanted to give a pass to more than the Browns, so we'll get to them in a
Sure.
minute. But 10 is the Dolphins. Of all of these 10 and 5 teams, there are 6 of them. They have the third best points differential. They're just consistent. And after all of the bad losses this week, I wanted to reward consistency. So I went with the Dolphins at 10. It wasn't pretty against the Raiders at time, and you needed some Fitz magic. I'm not a huge fan of going back and forth with the quarterbacks, but they just show up every week, and some teams don't show up every week. So I've got them at 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, you gotta respect that. Like I said, I would have them at 11. Um, Look, I mean, like you said, they show up every week. They took advantage of the Raiders' mistakes. They controlled the football well. They got a tough matchup against the Bills coming up, but there are a lot of other ways they can make the playoffs. From what I read, there are a lot of other things that could happen that would get them in. So something to follow. Um, my ninth place team, and I'm curious to see if you still had them in your top 10, is the Colts.
I have the Colts at
Um,
9 as well.
Okay, there we go. Look at that. So there's good news and there's bad news for them. Bad news is they allowed a huge comeback from the Steelers in the second half. The good news, of course, was they still controlled the game in an impressive fashion in the first half, despite missing both of their starting offensive tackles. Their defense was great against the run. It fell apart against the pass as the game went on. They were uncharacteristically turning over the ball too much, and now they're just outside the playoff picture. But I say just outside. They've got identical records. They're outside the playoff picture because of tiebreakers. So they've got the Jaguars in Week 17. They take care of business. They need a little help outside of that, but there are a lot of ways that they can get in. A lot of circumstances where they beat the Jaguars and one of 8 things happens and they're in the playoffs. So I'm willing to give this team a pass to some degree. I'm still maybe I'm too optimistic about this Colts team, but I still look at a team that has multiple ways to win a game, uh, that has a well-rounded roster. So I'm willing to give them the ninth spot still in my rankings.
Me too. You mentioned the offensive tackles. The optics of that game looked much better to me than what happened to any number of teams, from the Cardinals to the Browns to the Titans, etc. And right, this is they're losing on tiebreakers. I don't care about that for the purposes of this conversation. I
Right.
I love the balance of this team just like you do. I've been consistent that I think they're a better team than the Titans, and I'm going to continue to put them ahead of the Titans, even though I'm still picking the Titans to win the division. Again, tiebreakers. It, it is what it
Yeah.
is. It's their fault they lost to the Jaguars in week 1, but since then they've been really good. I'm just not I'm not going to get too upset about that loss considering everything else that happened. I have the Buccaneers at 8 because
Okay.
the Buccaneers left no doubt as to who the better football team was playing against half of the Lions coaching staff and eventually a third string quarterback. Now, you would expect
Yeah.
just about any team in the NFL to beat the Lions in that form, but they did it incredibly convincingly. They now have 4 wins by 23 or more points this year. So, yes, it's been a little up and down, but all of a sudden they're playing really good football and they have the capability of looking as good as anybody in the NFL on their day. And with all of the teams that I don't trust at the moment, I'm with you that there were the 8 teams that were no brainers for me putting in there, and then it was a question of which of these teams that had some sort of frustration this week do I go with in the final 2 spots.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm with you. I think, I'm looking at it now. I think I had a clear, it was eight as for me as well. I have the Ravens at number eight. Um, they jumped out to an early lead. I have the Bucks a few spots higher, so I'll get to them in a minute. The Ravens jumped out to an early lead against the Giants. They didn't let go. They sacked Daniel Jones 6 times. And like I said last week, like we talked about last week, this could really be the team that nobody wants to face in the playoffs.
Yep.
If they beat the Bengals in Week 17, they're in. Um, the offense to me looks like the one that led them to a 14-2 regular season record last year. Lamar Jackson, another strong game, of course. Yes, like you said, the context, or not like you said, the context of them being playing the Giants. You have to remember the context, of course. But this is a Ravens team that can run the ball. They can control the time of possession. They can avoid turnovers, and that makes them a dangerous team come the postseason. A team that nobody's going to want to face. I considered having them a few spots higher. Even I just wasn't quite sure I wanted to go there yet. But the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more I feel like I actually might like to have the Ravens a few spots higher.
I thought about putting them a couple spots higher. I have them at 7.
Hmm.
I It's a 4 game winning streak. 3 of those wins by at least 14 points. They've looked, and I made this point after last week's performance.
Hmm.
They had COVID and a really difficult stretch. The beginning and the end has been phenomenal and pretty much exactly what you saw last season. Maybe a little bit worse. Lamar Jackson has been quite as good. And I wanted to put them ahead of the Steelers. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. But I am really high on this team. To me, they are the team that you do not want to play because they're not winning their division. The circumstances and that 4-4 stretch in the middle prevented that. But that record is deceiving. They are much closer to the 14-2 team from last season than what has happened this so far this season indicates.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% with you there on the Ravens. I have the Steelers at number seven.
Okay.
I have them up one spot from last week. Just one spot. I had them. I think we both had them eighth last week. I brought them up one spot. Obviously, we know that they trailed by 17 points in that game against the Colts, and they come storming back. Roethlisberger, 342 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. You wrote about this yesterday. I read in your 5 things. You talked about how they, or 2 days ago, whenever it was, that they fixed a problem, but
Mm-hmm.
not the problem. They're still reliant on Ben Roethlisberger to
Yep.
a extreme degree, which that can absolutely work out for some wins in the right situations. But I don't feel like a deep run in the playoffs or against an elite team. I will say this though, like about the Steelers, which is one reason I might be a little bit more optimistic. As far as what they did differently against the Colts, it was something they've been reluctant to do. They threw intermediate and deep passes, and that produced about a 40-yard touchdown pass to Deontay Johnson. It also led to a couple of pass interference penalties that were crucial for them. It opened up some space underneath for some short passes. It opened up some space, made those easier because the Colts had to defend both. And it also provided room for a few runs here and there. That could be something that's really beneficial for them if they're willing to throw the deep passes. They're willing to sort of expand what they're willing to do because that like they're so reliant on Roethlisberger, and their game plan has always been so straightforward for an opponent to plan against that they're just going to go short passes. That if they really are making an adjustment there, that's something that makes me a little bit more optimistic, but optimistic to the point of I moved them up one spot because I still don't feel like I'm willing to put them up there in that elite tier of teams.
I've got the Steelers at 6. I was not going any
Okay.
higher than that. It's picking between these 6, 7, and 8. It sounds like. I'm
Yeah.
guessing you have the Buccaneers at 6.
Yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
so yeah, 20 rushing yards. It's the same story. It was even worse this time around, and part of that was also, in fairness to the Steelers, you're not trying to run the football when you're down 17 points in the third quarter. I
Right.
mean, it was the situation
Yeah.
lended itself to what they wanted to do anyway. And yeah, Josh and I talked about this yesterday. This is my firm belief. The question, there are two questions because we talked about last week after Monday night. This
Mhm.
team isn't beating anybody if Ben Roethlisberger doesn't play better. But we were,
Right.
at least I, and I think you were as well, confident that we were not going to see that kind of Ben Roethlisberger again. And he
Mhm.
was the Ben Roethlisberger we're used to in this game. That's enough to win a playoff game.
Sure.
That's enough to beat a Colts team and make this kind of comeback. The question is whether it's enough to seriously contend with the Bills and the Chiefs. That's what we won't know the answer to until they play somebody in the playoffs. So that's
Right.
why I have them at 6. This formula is how they got to 11 and 0. If they can pull off this, they're a good team.
Mhm.
But we were also consistent in saying from the very beginning they're not on the same level as Kansas City,
Right.
even when they were winning all those games, because of the same questions we still have. It's the same story. It's just their quarterback was actually good as opposed to horrendous.
Yeah.
But he's been good most of the season, and this is who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out as far as right how they match up against because it's one like you said it's one of those things where we won't know until we get there how they match up how they actually play against one of those teams that we know is in the real top tier whether that formula falls apart for them even if Roethlisberger is having a pretty good game like I right it's not one of those things where if he's good they're destined to win against great teams
Right, right.
so if he's really good, they have a shot at a good team like the Colts. But we don't know how they would that would work out against the truly elite teams. For number 6, like we said, I have the Bucks at number 6. Um, Obviously, a depleted Lions team. They're just clicking at the right time though on both sides of the ball. It was another turnover free game for them on offense. Another turnover free game for Tom Brady. Obviously, sensational game from him. So sensational that they could put in Blaine Gabbert in the second half. But yeah, there's not a lot else to say that we haven't already talked about with the Bucks. But I just think it looks like they're clicking at the right time. Both sides of the ball, they're going to be a threat come the playoffs. I have no doubt about that. My fifth place team, I have the Seahawks.
Same.
Same. All right. Yes. So my observation with the Seahawks, the big one is if you could combine their first half offense with their second half defense, you would have an unstoppable team. They just haven't had both at the same time.
Right.
It's like a tale of two seasons for them. Russell Wilson was sacked 5 times in this game, in their game against the Rams when they claimed the NFC West title. But the defense was incredible. It allowed just 3 Rams field goals. Now, the Rams' offensive struggles clearly played a factor, but the Seattle defense did a great job of taking away everything that Jared Goff does well. And the defense hasn't given up more than 17 points in 5 straight games. Their offense, meanwhile, continues to look less than explosive. Now, Wilson was smooth when it mattered most. And if he gets hot at the right time, this is a team that could make a very deep run, which is
Yep.
why I have them up at fifth, because he's certainly capable of that. And the defense, right, it's one of those things where I'm more confident when you've got this great defense with it, well, not great, when you have the defense performing well and you have Wilson able to maybe all of a sudden, it would not surprise me, snap
Right.
your fingers. He's on a hot streak. I'm much more confident in that than if it was the other way around, where the offense was firing on all cylinders, but the defense was a disaster because I wouldn't be as confident that the defense could turn on a dime. So it's not a perfect situation, but given everything that's below them, like it seemed to me very clear that they belonged in that top 5. They're not up there with the very top teams for me because of the offensive inconsistency, but the fact that they can just flip a switch and I think they could get that going. The defense is doing well now. That I have them at fifth. And what are your thoughts on the
Yeah.
Seahawks?
You basically stole exactly what I was going to say. The
Mm-hmm.
Rams scored 6 points in the first half, 3 in the second half. The defense has been outstanding. I will just continue to have faith in Russell Wilson's ability to deliver in big time moments and in the playoffs. I would 100% take this version of the Seahawks over the reverse where they're winning
Yeah.
45-42 or losing 45-42.
Mm-hmm.
I'm that I'm just going to stick with Russell Wilson. I
Yeah.
It doesn't faze me that they haven't been great on offense, but it
No.
also keeps them out of this top tier. I'm right there with you. Same logic. I've got the Saints at 4.
Same.
Alvin Kamara scored 6 rushing touchdowns, tied the NFL record, fourth straight division title. I picked them to win the Super Bowl. I don't feel great about that at the moment, but they are as they have that little bit of the edge on the Buccaneers in the NFC South because of the slow start Tampa Bay had, and that's exactly what I thought was going to happen. I didn't think it was going to go quite this way for the Bucs, but I love the Saints defense. I've said that before. You're starting to get into a little bit of a rhythm with all your key pieces on offense. Well, at this point they've lost Michael Thomas, but eventually, in theory, in the playoffs, you got all your pieces back. There's just 3 teams ahead of them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the reason for me at those 3 teams ahead of him partly is right. Drew Brees was much better, but he was not perfect. There were some
Mm-hmm.
questionable throws. He's improving. He's trending in the right direction, but he's still clearly got a ways to go to get back to his old self. If he's going to get back there, we don't know exactly how far he can get back to. And I'm also a little bit concerned is not the right word, but a little bit cautious about the defense hasn't been as dominant as it has been earlier in the season.
Yeah.
All 5 of the Vikings red zone trips they allowed a touchdown, or the Vikings scored a touchdown on all
Yeah,
5 of
yeah.
the red zone trips. So I'm a little bit cautious that maybe the defense has some cracks in it. It's a great it's a very good defense.
And they've been
but
disappointing at times. On paper, I
right,
love them.
right. Oh, yeah, 100%. Which is I'm with you. Yeah, and I have them 4th as well. So clearly
Yeah.
I'm not too down on it. But yeah, there's some holes. There's some areas where I see some cracks in the foundation a little bit, but they're clearly that number 14 for me. I didn't really have any question about how I would have them over the Seahawks, but that I would have them behind these top 3 teams. Do we have Bills 3, Packers 2, Chiefs 1?
Indeed.
All right. So we already kind of talked about the Bills. Like, I don't really have too much more to say about them. I'm
Outscored
just
their
really
last 2 opponents 86-28. That's really all I have to say.
Oh, that's a stat. I like that. Yeah. Yeah, that is wow. So yeah, Bills. I considered bringing them up to second in my rankings, but I just didn't see any. Like I sort of I find my words. Here we go. I started to consider moving them up to second, and then I realized, well, the Packers haven't done anything to make me make that switch. I'm still just going to go with what I'm more confident in inherently, which is Aaron Rodgers in that situation, because they didn't do anything to make me think I should downgrade them. He was sensational against 4 touchdowns, three to Devontae Adams in their big win over the Titans in Green Bay on Sunday. At this point, I'm incredibly confident in the offense. There's no questions there. Very limited questions there. What was really encouraging was the defensive effort against the Titans. Of course, the Titans were playing in Green Bay. It was a less than ideal playing conditions. But the Titans were averaging 31 points per game. They scored just 14 against the Packers, and who did enough to keep Derrick Henry from being a very big factor in this game. That was the kind of defensive effort that makes me feel like if the Packers can repeat that to some degree, I mean, that was champion. Like Aaron Rodgers said it after the game, that was championship style defense, and we know what they're capable of offensively. So I realized I was overthinking that too much, and that I need to leave the Packers where they are at number 2.
I said this yesterday. I'll say it again. That was the closest 40-14 game I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was actually competitive at a point, and there was just
Mhm.
no reason it should have ever been competitive. That thing could have been 52-7.
Mhm.
It was a phenomenal performance. I wasn't changing them after that. That was exactly what I wanted to see from them. And yeah, the Chiefs haven't won by more than 6 points since week 8 when they had the dubious honor of playing the Jets. But I just don't care. I don't.
Yeah, I'm a little bit like I'm not concerned at all. I would not say concerned. I have them number 1. I'm keeping my eye on it because I
Yeah,
feel like part of it is their performance. As long as they can control it, right? It's up and down with the opponent. They're sort of playing to the opponent, which
it's a good way to
works
put it.
in this situation. But all of a sudden, come the playoffs, they need to be able to rise as much as they need to rise to play to the opponent again. Like there's some concern that if they get too caught in that pattern, that it could cause problems. I'm not predicting that though. I'm not really concerned that much either. I think this is a team that just could use a break, and they're going to get one after clinching the AFC's number 1 seed. They're not going to have to worry about it. I don't even know who they're playing this week, but they don't have to play. They don't have to put their starters out there. They can get some rest in week 17.
Yeah. There you have it. Top 10 in the NFL, our power rankings every Tuesday. We're taking another break. When we come back, humor me please, and then plenty of baseball coming up in hour 2. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.